Hey Taylorians, greetings and welcome to our podcast session on What's Up Conversations on EQ. My name is Michelle Francis and I am a life skill facilitator and I am going to facilitate this session for today. Now, our topic for today's podcast session is on entrepreneurship along with our special guest, Mr. Alvin, who's here. Welcome, Alvin.
Happy to be here.
And he has a background of being a clinical psychologist, and he is a clinical psychologist who's a turned entrepreneur, transformed failures and hardship into success, building multiple thriving businesses as well through resilience and perseverance. How are you feeling today, Alvin?
Yeah, I'm great. Ready to go?
Great. All right. Are we ready to start the session?
Yes, definitely.
With some juicy context for our listeners for today. Now, Alvin, since you have so many background from the conversations that we had previously, the first item in my mind, because our topic is on entrepreneurship, what drove you as a clinical psychologist, because that's what you're doing currently, right? From there into having your own startup, and what drove your motivation towards that?
So I have the more educated view currently based on going through what I've been through.
Okay.
By definition, an entrepreneur is someone who can sustain a business.
Okay.
And in order to sustain a business, it has to provide some kind of value to others. So others will be willing to subscribe to the service or consume the product and so on.
Okay.
This is what I enjoy doing now as an entrepreneur.
Right.
But back then, and I think this is the common perception that people might have of a business owner, is that a business owner or the boss of the company just needs to relax, don't do much. All of the employees will work for the boss.
Yeah.
You can drive a nice car and hang out by the beach and have all this passive income.
Right.
So I think these are the common misconceptions that people have in starting their journey in entrepreneurship. And quite similarly, that was how I started off as well.
Oh, okay.
So I was actually employed for a couple of years. I was a psychologist. I was also an educator.
Oh,
so I was
wow.
teaching undergrad psychology students.
Okay.
But with employment, I think the very obvious thing that happens and that sets in probably a few years in once that that shine of that new experience start to fade off is that this can become quite predictable.
All right.
And I think that's the allure of having an employment as well.
Okay.
That you can have stability.
Right.
You can have a more confirmed income. You can plan your life. That's what an employment can provide. But what I saw from that is a projection of the future 10, 20, 30 years from where I was. And I could already predict, what will likely be my income range, the kind of activities that I'll be doing in my career, to what extent my career can progress. And I realized that probably I wanted more.
Okay.
In terms of the overall income, in terms of the level of excitement that I derive from my job. And all that I felt couldn't be answered by maintaining employment with the company.
Okay.
And that was what started the journey lah.
Wow. That's very interesting. You had your priorities set and you knew that this is not going to bring you to where you want to be, and hence that was, I believe, a driving force that motivated you. Thank you so much for sharing.
I also oftentimes joke with my wife that entrepreneurs have this. I read it in a book actually.
Okay.
The entrepreneurial DNA.
Right.
Like when we think of DNA, is something that is expressed in our genetics.
Okay.
That some people are just meant to be entrepreneurs and some are not.
Okay.
So among I think the qualities of an entrepreneur, they typically are more risk-taking, and perhaps they oftentimes seek a high degree of stimulation,
Okay.
which from a long-term employment point of view, if you are in a job for a while,
Okay.
there's going to be routine, there's going to be some kind of predictable life that a person will go through. And I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's probably something that they don't feel very comfortable with. And
Okay.
this is what I always joke that I have the entrepreneurial DNA.
The genes that
Yeah,
runs. But
yeah.
do you come from a background where your family does or runs certain businesses and all that? You do.
No, actually not. And I think both entrepreneurs, one who might come from a background where the family were business owners,
Okay.
or are business owners, and coming from an entrepreneur coming from a background of perhaps parents, family who were generally employed
Right.
their whole life.
Okay.
I think the overall perception of wanting to start a business by their loved ones, by their relatives, are actually quite different. So knowing peers whose parents were business owners and them wanting to start a business, oftentimes what I get from them is that the parents are very supportive. Hey, you should be doing a business. I've also known people where they have been employed for a while and parents are saying, hey, why are you continuing the employment? Why don't you start your own business? On the other hand, I think, and I think I'm overgeneralizing here, I'm just speaking anecdotally from my experience, for people within families where there are no business owners, no business experience,
Okay.
having someone in a family wanting to start a business,
Right.
there's going to be a very foreign idea that, there might be good intentions coming from a place of love, but from my experience, family might not really understand
Right.
the motivation as to why you'd like to actually start a business.
Okay.
And speaking from how I first started out, because I'm blessed to have parents who were very supportive, who I had the privilege of going through a good education, and then telling them that I wish to start a business, unrelated to the industry even.
Okay.
My first business was actually what we call a Berniaga style rainbow style business.
Right.
You just go by the roadside and you set up something.
And you just do.
Yeah, no license or anything.
Okay.
So like a rainbow like a rainbow. And my parents were scratching their heads. Why do you want to do this? We love you. Obviously, I can sense that, but
the support is there. But why?
I sense the resistance.
Okay.
So when we don't understand something, of course, the resistance is there. Even till today, I recognize that they do care and love me. But I think for them, love could also mean that you shouldn't be doing this. Why you're harming yourself. So in a nutshell, I think it can differ from individual to individual, and from my experience, family and friends, while they might care for me, they might not really understand the journey. Yeah.
Right. Wow, what a inspiring journey and a story. Maybe you could share with us about what actually you're doing currently.
Yeah. So currently, if we really think about entrepreneurship and all entrepreneurs, you can say that not any one entrepreneur is going to be different than the other. They all have different circumstances to when they first started up their first business. They might have different levels of education. In my position, I had a professional job. So even if I were to share my experience, it wouldn't be the same with all other entrepreneurs. But speaking from my experience, I first started up a business in F&B actually.
Okay.
Rainbow style initially. And then it progressed into a very small cafe.
Right.
About 400 square feet. You could cram in maybe 20 customers at most.
Okay.
And then I went into e-commerce,
Okay.
setting up an online page that something known as drop shipping, getting
Okay.
in products from China
All right.
and to market it to the local customers,
Mm.
which then progressed into an online counseling platform
Mm.
where it matches professional therapists to clients
Okay.
through a messaging platform.
Right.
While all at the same time, here and there, I was freelancing and also doing my role as a psychologist. So I think this particular psychologist thing might differ from other business owners. And over that period of time as well, from a private practice that I started with a couple others, it grew over time as I was doing all these other businesses. And just in about 2020
Okay.
was when I decided to really focus on just one thing.
Okay.
And that was the private practice that I'm currently managing.
All right.
At that time, it was getting too difficult to split my attention through different, part-time, full-time roles and other businesses, and focusing on one will bring about the most outcome.
Okay.
And very recently, I started another private practice. My
Alright.
current one is for adults,
Alright.
and then the most recent one will be for children and teens.
Oh, wow.
Though I'm not the person that is providing the services, I'm managing the business operations instead.
I see.
So as of now, I am within the mental health space
Okay.
with two private practice. One of them I'm still providing clinical services, while the other just solely on the business.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. So your place is actually based at where is it?
One is in Mount Kiara, one is
Okay.
in PJ.
So the newer one is in PJ. Is it?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, with all of this, this journey and this experiences that you shared, I'm sure with the transition in different parts of your life, you would have had many challenges. How do you think these challenges helped you and still motivated you towards achieving where you are right now?
I think it's a whole part of, and based on what you've heard just now, there has been a variety of different businesses. I could count probably about 7 or 8 by now, which also meant that the previous 7 had failed. That I think the challenges here could be anticipated, but yet it's still something bitter to go through. For example, right now, speaking from experience, failure is definitely something that will happen in the journey of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
If you are first starting off in your first or second or maybe even third business, there's going to be a very high chance that those businesses won't work out. In the entrepreneur circles, they call it failing forward.
All right.
When you fail your business, you're actually moving forward in one way or another because you learn from the failure.
Okay.
But I think the challenge with failing is that it has a negative impact on a variety of domains of a person's life.
Okay.
Whether it's financial, if you have spent a lot of money into the business, maybe your personal savings, self-esteem, friends, family, you are in full public view of that failure. And then getting started again after a failure. Having expended all of that energy into something and then not working out, and then having to recuperate your energy, your finances, and so on to start again. It can get very demoralizing, very tiring, and also have a very negative impact on one's mental health. And that's something that I repeatedly went through throughout the past decade or so,
Right.
from one business to another.
With all of these challenges that you mentioned, right? Because this you can't pick on one because there's a few challenges, like you mentioned. Seven of your businesses that didn't go as planned, and you failed, and then you had the resilience to actually bounce back and go for the next one. Was there was definitely a weakest point that you had, or a few weak points that you had in your entire journey. But what was that driving factor that you would like to share? If we were to fail in something, you had the driving force to like, no, let me try something else, because you kept going. You didn't stop at like 1 or 2. You kept going up till 7. So I think the number of attempts is enormous. And what was the driving factor that you had that actually made you to make these attempts despite you having failures and different challenges?
Yeah, I think listening to that question as you were speaking, I'm not even sure if these qualities are healthy. It might even be unhealthy.
Okay. Let's hear.
An unhealthy one that I realized early on is that kind of chip on my shoulder.
Okay.
Sometimes having failed in something, a person might have this sort of drive to prove others wrong,
Okay.
So, having failed my business and having told my family that, hey, I want to start a business, I don't care.
Right.
Yes, I was a psychologist, but I want to do this. And failing in an attempt to save face, I guess, to show that, hey, I can actually do it, to try again.
Okay.
But I think the nice word to this is probably resilience, like what you mentioned, and tying it back to entrepreneurial, having the entrepreneurial DNA, probably a requirement as part of being an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur means that we will likely fail quite a number of times, and only with failure can we learn what didn't work, and in order to continue pushing through despite the failures would be resilience. And another healthy or unhealthy thing that likely needs to happen is to have some kind of unrealistic optimism of the future.
Okay.
Because
the truth.
Yeah, facing a failure, especially when in the past putting in all of my life savings into business and it not working out. It is a very strong signal, like information right in your face that this is probably not a good idea.
This is not for you.
Yeah. And having to, go past this information, this evidence that's right in front of you, and wanting to do the same thing, probably in a different way, a little bit smarter than the previous attempt, but the same thing, doesn't seem like a very smart choice.
Okay.
But it's what business owners do. They have to do again this business.
Yeah.
And it's actually very unrealistic and doesn't really make sense. Statistics actually show it.
Okay.
Businesses generally fail.
Right.
A large proportion of them fail.
Okay.
So if I were to summarize the characteristics of people who might want to be successful in business, probably they need to be unrealistically optimistic about their future, being resilient, expect to fail, and continue on forward regardless of that. Which I think, any reasonable, logical person likely wouldn't think that that's a good idea lah.
Okay. Right. So that was one of the few things that kept you going despite all the challenges you had. That's I think there's a very strong driving force in you, and what I sense from all the things that you have shared is you have a very strong growth mindset in terms of wanting to grow and to see that there's other opportunities if one doesn't work. Having that in mind, how do you think having this growth mindset is important for the younger generations if you were to suggest a way or to tell them that this is what you actually need in order for you to be able to probably have a startup? How would you guide them, or what would be the pathway that you will navigate them towards having growth mindset to achieving like a startup or something?
Yeah, because a growth mindset can be defined as believing that we have personal control over developing our abilities and so on, rather than it being due to external circumstances, luck and so on.
Okay.
And I would think that this is also part of that DNA to be an entrepreneur, because a lot of the times, starting a business might feel like you are being trapped in the corner.
Okay.
You don't really have much options,
Okay.
especially when things start going wrong, and they will go wrong. I think we can just anticipate that when you start a business, every day when you wake up, there's going to be things that will go wrong.
What's the surprise for today?
Yeah. And I've been put in situations where there isn't a choice, but to take the responsibility and to figure out what to do with that particular problem. And that requires a reliance on that kind of thinking that I have the ability that can be developed. I can develop this skill to do it, because if I don't do it, then that's really pretty much the end of it. Ultimately, if we are first starting a business, we will start off small. So we are an SME operator.
Okay.
And as an SME operator, a lot of the important decisions will rest on the business owner. And no one else is responsible for that other than yourself.
Yeah.
So when faced with situations where you are supposed to be doing something about it, there really isn't a choice.
Okay.
You have to act, or you have to decide, or
Do
come up with something. If you don't, then that's the end of your business. So I think having the growth mindset is really important. In fact, probably a necessity when starting a business, because otherwise the business ultimately is just doomed to fail. You are the responsible person, number one.
Right.
So it's not in a situation where I'm working in a company, I don't do my job, someone else will pick it up for me, or worst case scenario, I get fired, I can look for another job. Not as a business where you might have employees. You have put in your life savings, perhaps. If you're willing for it to fail, then maybe that's okay. But I think when you're starting a business, probably you wouldn't want that to happen.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing some insights on the importance of growth mindset, especially when you have challenges and failures, because these days we see a lot of people, like what you mentioned, when one doesn't work, they just tend to give up. There's no drive or force that pushes them to keep trying and make the attempt. So I hope your stories will really inspire our listeners. With that, now that you are here at this point of your life, what would be that one or the most important skill that's right on top of your head as an entrepreneur you think one should have, and this has been helping you throughout your journey so far? Like you are in a very stable position right now. You're much more settled as compared to the rough sailing journey that you went through.
Yeah.
What would be the one thing that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, it's probably the things that we have spoken about earlier. So aside from resilience, which is a necessity, having a growth mindset. If I were to pick between the two, probably having both are equally important. But if I were to pick between the two, probably growth mindset will be more important.
Okay.
And the reason for that will come down to what I mentioned about each entrepreneur being very different. So I am a trained psychologist, started doing business. Someone else could have minimal to no education, starting with very little money, or someone could be very highly. So one entrepreneur to another, different.
Very different.
So there's no one size fit all advice that can be provided.
Okay.
Sometimes some people will say, your network is your net worth because you know people, therefore, or you have your family's wealth, therefore you can do it, or whatever. But the truth is that we need to develop that kind of resourcefulness. And if we do have this growth mindset, we can see that things can be developed.
Okay.
That we don't just give up at any time when we notice something is lacking. because there's always going to be a disadvantage to me compared to someone else's advantage. We are
Correct.
all actually different.
Correct.
But if you want to determine what's the secret recipe to success for a business owner, you could look at every successful entrepreneur, and all of them have
Different
yeah.
ideas.
Yeah, so someone might be very intelligent. Another person might have the right connections. Another person might have went through a period of adversity early in life, so they are very resilient. They all have different resources that they can utilize, and they all have something lacking about them. But they wouldn't get started if they just notice that, hey, oh, this is lacking about me. That's life. Others can be successful entrepreneurs because of so and so and so, but not me. So if that is the mindset, a fixed mindset that things cannot be developed, rather than a growth mindset, I don't think that person would even consider to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for this really good tip. I think is very useful as well. But I do agree that both growth mindset and resilience, they sort of work together.
Yeah.
Right? And it's both highly important. But based on your stories with growth mindset, I hope that it will be a good insight for the listeners as well, or even for those who wish to have their own startup soon. They should have this in mind. With that, is there a personal story or an experience that you would like to share with us? Just one particular incident or something that you encountered throughout your journey that you were at your lowest or your weakest point, like what you mentioned just now, when things don't work and then you had to bounce back. But is there like a situation or a specific story that you can share with us?
I think throughout the past decade where I had been involved in doing one business or another, there have been a variety of events that are quite memorable. Throughout this time as well, there's probably been about a couple of times where I've genuinely been depressed for a variety of reasons, whether it's overwork, dealing with the mental health consequences of my actions and so on. But if I were to pick one that is more related to first starting up will be when it was the first afternoon, first day of starting this business.
Okay.
Which was the rainbow style business.
Oh, right. That was your first one, right?
That was the first one.
Okay.
And I had this brilliant idea of trying to sell skewers that are flavored with more premium ingredients.
Right.
So you can think of it as quite a glorified satay lah.
Premium satay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the ingredients that I had wanted to use were cherry tomatoes.
Okay.
And for those who are in F&B, they will know that you oftentimes get your products from the supplier. You get them in bulk to get the cost down.
Okay.
So I was up front in this very big factory, this very big warehouse, trying to get a box of cherry tomatoes for a cheaper price. And the front office were quite gracious to entertain my request.
Okay.
But I was there in a used Avanza to store the items. I bought it secondhand. And then I was in shorts, flip-flops and so on. But one guy came in and, I later on learned probably he's the head of department or something.
Okay. Of the store?
Of this, factory or warehouse and distributor lah.
Right.
And I hear in the background there's some commotion in the back office.
Okay.
And I could hear him reprimanding the employees, I suppose. And eventually one of them came out and says that you can't wait here. You have to go outside and bring your car over to the other end of the parking lot, and you wait there. We will deliver your cherry tomatoes. So I gathered that perhaps I wasn't looking the part.
Okay.
And there were a lot of truck drivers that go in and out.
Okay.
So I think growing up in a protected environment where there's this status about you, right? So you're from a middle income family, let's say, and you go through a good education. You're not exposed to, I suppose, ridicule due to your perhaps status or class or a different kind of a job or employment.
Okay.
Which was the first time I had actually encountered that kind of treatment.
Okay.
That I am a lesser than individual than that person that had walked in.
Okay.
That was actually the first feeling of ridicule and humiliation that I've encountered in my life. And it was a very tough day because later on that day it was raining and the Rainbow had decided to set up shop, and open air environment. And by the end of the night, really fumbling through the operations, not knowing exactly what I was doing. The barbecue pit was heating up to the extent that it was melting the pit itself.
Okay.
That the pressure and stress built up to the extent that I physically threw up.
Okay.
Because of all the stress and anxiety
that you had.
And by the end of the night, it is a very difficult feeling to describe. It is a feeling like you are in doom.
Okay.
That I'm not sure if it's suitable to be on air. Like as if the gates of hell just open and you're just there.
Okay.
So I'm there in my toilet at the end of the night and just on the floor and just sobbing uncontrollably from all the events that has happened earlier in the day and physically feeling really unwell and thinking to myself, tomorrow I still have to do this again. So I think that was one of the first challenging events of many in my business career so far.
Wow. And my question right on top of my head is, did you do the same thing the next day?
Good question, because I didn't. That first attempt lasted for a grand total of 1 day. I went back to the drawing board, and the first lesson I learned from this is that before you scale, you get things in bulk, which I did. One big box of cherry tomatoes, which all went to waste, is that you have to start small. So lesson number 1, start small.
Okay.
So evidently, I'm not from a business background.
Right.
All of my lessons were mainly of this nature. I met with a problem and I realized, oh, that's silly of me. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And then I will do it again, but
Okay.
Learning from my past mistake.
Okay.
So from that point onwards, what I did was I contacted all these weekend, malls, they have these pop-up stalls.
Right.
So I contacted managements of these malls and wanted to rent for a day to test out the product.
Okay.
To generate some kind of feedback from the customers. And, that's likely a smarter way to do things than to assume that I'm going to buy all these things in large quantities and it's going to sell out. I'm going to be rich.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the perception you had when you first started, but then you realized that, okay, the key takeaway is to start small.
Yes.
So what happened to the bulk of tomatoes as well?
So I had a chest freezer.
Okay.
So it's all stuffed in there.
Okay.
Most of them eventually, gone bad lah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. That's a bold attempt that you made, but I'm glad there was a learning outcome out of it.
Yeah. And, lesson number 2 is that you need to have sufficient funds lah. And aside from starting small, likely having a good runway, 6 months, 1 year runway of your operations is likely a better way to manage your finances. So that's another lesson sometime down the road.
Yeah, that's very good. I think I was about to go to the next question, which is lessons that you would like to share, but I think you've wrapped it up already. To start small and also to ensure that you have enough funds to run whatever you have in mind. Thank you so much, Alvin. I am inspired. In fact, I don't run a business, but listening to your stories and seeing your entire journey. I am truly inspired, and I hope the listeners will as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. With that, we will move on to the second segment of our session, which is a rapid fire session. And here I'll be asking you some questions, more of this or that. So whatever that comes up to your mind first, feel free to just tell any first answers
Sure.
that comes up. Right. So to kickstart, easy one. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Currently a morning person because I have a daughter.
Oh,
So
okay.
when she wakes up, I wake up.
Okay.
I send her to daycare.
All right.
But I used to be a night owl.
Used to be a night owl. That was before you had your daughter.
Yeah, so before my life of stability,
Right.
in all that chaos in my
Okay.
earlier parts of my adult life,
Okay.
definitely a night owl.
I see.
Mm.
Okay, right. Thank you. One skill everyone should master. What would that be? It doesn't have to be related to entrepreneurship, but
Mhm.
any skill that you think everyone must have the skill. What would that be?
I think having that growth mindset is likely an important skill
Okay,
that you can develop yourself,
right.
because regardless of whichever life options, you're going to encounter situations where you're faced with a problem, and the only way to manage it effectively will be to think of how we can do that, and that requires us to think that we can actually do that, right, from our
Okay.
own abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Growth mindset. That's a good one. How would you define success? If I don't know if it's possible to put it in one word, but how would you? What is success to you, and how would you define success?
In one word?
Can if you have the word,
Uh,
just shoot.
Fulfillment.
Fulfillment. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good word.
Yeah.
In maybe you can elaborate a little bit. Like fulfillment in what sense?
So one thing that they mention about, one thing that they say to people who want to be an entrepreneur but they're afraid of taking that first step is that the graveyard is full of rich people
Oh,
because they carry all of their $1 million ideas
okay.
with them to their grave, and they don't act on it.
Mm.
So fulfillment comes from doing what you want to do, and to not be limited with the obstacles that are presented. So it might be, starting a hobby, a passion, an interest, a business. And I think fulfillment needs to be individually defined. So what fulfills me might not fulfill you, and we all want to be fulfilled in living a life.
Right, that's great. Thank you so much. What is the one best advice that you have received so far? Someone advised you about something. What is that? You think that that's the best advice that you have received? Tough one.
Yeah. Because they will think that I'm more in the business of giving advice rather than to receive.
Yeah.
Advice.
Or maybe if you have not received, maybe
Yeah.
it's an advice that you read somewhere or you heard about it somewhere, and then you went like, oh yeah, this is a good one. Or you've seen it somewhere.
Yeah, there's this saying of an arrow doesn't get shot. An arrow gets shot by first being pulled back.
Okay.
So as an archer, you pull back the arrow,
Right.
and shoot it out.
Should it?
So you could only move forward if there's a time where you might encounter failure, obstacles.
Oh wow.
So somehow that popped up in my mind.
Oh, that's a good one. Something that I've not heard.
At one point or time or another, I do think about it as a way to really reframe the difficulties or challenges I was facing at that time.
This also reminds me of it's something like resilience. Something happens and you kind of bounce back and then you move forward after that. Right. That's a very good one. In fact, I think this is the best advice I've heard so far. Thank you for sharing. What is your favorite activity to recharge yourself? Something that you probably do on a daily basis or weekly, can be anything, but you know that this is your favorite activity.
Yeah, so I'm rather, maybe based on my training as well as a psychologist, rather evidence-based. I know that exercise has a lot of benefits, and more recently, I've really got myself very physically active. So I would consider it to be an activity that really energizes me, but I know the science actually supports it. And I think another layer of this activity that I do that really adds depth to my enjoyment of it is that I do enjoy going through material on the science of why this exercise or that exercise or why fitness is actually important. So that's mentally stimulating as well.
Okay, exercising, that's good. So is this something you do on a daily basis or?
Only in the past recent months, I do it about 5 times a week.
All right. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, thank you. What would be one tool that you use to adapt to a new situation?
Self-compassion.
Self-compassion. Wow, very deep.
Like, self-compassion is the ability to be kind to the self. So when faced with a tough situation, my initial reaction would probably be, would have been, in past events, to not cope with it. So
Okay.
likely I wouldn't feel very well emotionally. I wouldn't be feeling very good. I'll be keeping to myself.
Okay.
But over time, I think it's the wisdom of knowing that this is all part of the process, and to just allow myself to feel this way. Because eventually I'll pick myself back up again, and then a new day starts, and
Move forward.
somehow things just go along.
That's good. Self-compassion. That's a very deep tool, and I think it has been very effective for you as well. Right. One quick tip to handle stress. I know it's going to be very different the way everyone handles stress, but probably you can share what's your go-to way you do in order to handle stress.
Now, this might be counterintuitive to an entrepreneur because ultimately the business owner is the one that's fully responsible for the business. But one thing that helps me cope is to know that as much as I wish to be responsible for things, there are just some things that I've no control over. So just having the mental reframe at times when I hit a brick wall can be really helpful. As otherwise, probably I wouldn't be mentally sound enough to attend this session today.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good one. Okay. Wow. To just rewire yourself basically, and that way it helps you to manage your stress.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have come to the end of our rapid fire session. And for the viewers, is there any final message or any takeaways that you would like to share before we wrap it up?
I like this interview so NVIDIA is one of the largest company in the world right now, and its CEO Jensen Huang came up to an interview, and the interviewer had asked if you were to go back to that time when you first started the company, what would you do differently? And he would say, I wouldn't do it.
Really?
So the advice is, if you're thinking of starting a business, don't do it. No, just that's a half truth. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Yeah, so
Okay.
do it fully expecting that you're going to fail. Do it fully expecting that it's going to be really challenging. Your life will be out of balance. Do it knowing that you need to develop resilience, a growth mindset, and it's never going to be easy. And likely whatever perception that you have of a business owner, of living a very comfortable life, isn't going to be true, at least in the short to medium term. So if you are prepared for that, then welcome to the world of entrepreneurship, and wishing you all the best. Yeah.
Wow, that's I think that's a hard truth, right? Which many people fail to see this part, and having someone very experienced like you to share, I think it will definitely open up a lot of people's eyes and give them more insight to the reality and or probably the behind the scenes that happens when you are an entrepreneur yourself. Thank you so much, Alvin, for sharing, and it has been great to have you here as well. And with that, we have come to the end of our podcast session. Thank you, Alvin, once again, for
Welcome.
all your stories and insights, experiences, and everything that you have shared. I had a good experience with you as well, and I hope our viewers will also experience the same thing together. With that, we will wrap up our podcast for today. And till then, keep curious and grow at the same time. Thank you so much, everybody, and stay tuned. Goodbye. Signing
Goodbye.
off from me and also Alvin. Thank you.